many times do people need to learn that there are certain countries you should not mess with by being ignorant and reckless? Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. I'm Japanese, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. There is a brand new Pedro Pascal film out, and it's one of my personal favorites of 2025 that I've seen thus far. It's called Freaky Tales, and it's probably going to be in my top 10 of the year. You will have to stick around until December to fully confirm what ends up making the cut, but if you show me a group of lovable punks unleashing violent retribution against fascists, of course I'm going to have a good time watching that. I have no idea if and when this film will get a theatrical release in Brazil, so if you are one of my new semi-regular Brazilian viewers that live in Brazil and Freaky Tales is not coming to the cinemas there, then I would highly recommend that you go ahead and watch it whenever it becomes available either on streaming or on VOD. Also, if any of you are curious, I have already published my review of Freaky Tales here on my channel. So I was thinking back on a past video idea I had previously brainstormed and scrapped because I had thought that no one would find it interesting, but I decided to bring it back now that I have at least a handful of Brazilians that circle back if I talk about something that is in any way related to Brazil. I want to talk about the time Brazilian Backlash made a multi-billion-dollar corporation bend the knee and all but completely erase a propaganda episode from public access, physical media, streaming, VOD, and really anything else you can think of. Now, before we get into the specifics, I just want to make it clear from the very beginning, I do not think that negative, inaccurate stereotyping of Brazil is funny, but I do think that Brazilians bullying a megacorporation is amusing. So if I joke around at any point when we go through this, that part of the situation is where I am finding most of the humor. Law and Order is a grotesquely banal propaganda franchise, and it is by no means the only one of its kind. If you would like to learn some more details about the propaganda industrial complex, I would direct you to the YouTube channel Skip Intro, which has a number of video essays exploring a multitude of propaganda media, including but not limited to videos on Law and Order. The first Law and Order series premiered in 1990 and would go on to spawn a number of spin-offs, including Ground Zero for our story today, Law and Order: Criminal Intent. This show first premiered in 2001 and concluded in 2011, but the episode in question was one that aired in 2009 during season 8. A random bit of trivia, this was the second time Pedro Pascal appeared on Law & Order: Criminal Intent, but as far as I can tell, he was playing completely different characters with different names in those two episodes. Working actors, people who do not have name recognition and just need to book things for the sake of having a job and getting in SAG, maintaining benefits, paying rent, things of that nature, they don't have the luxury of choice. So it's extremely common for actors to have appeared in at least one propaganda procedural during the period of their careers when they are not as established, because there are so many of these types of shows. Those shows have a lot of episodes to make, and like I said, when you're a working actor, more often than not, work is work. The episode in question is called The Glory That Was, and to this day, you cannot find this episode on any of the official platforms. You look on iTunes, Peacock, the official DVD release, it is not on there. So what happened? The plot is mostly as basic and bland as every other propaganda episode of every propaganda procedural. Someone gets murdered, the police come in and they need to solve the case, and they will close that case before the credits roll. In this episode, it's a Belgian diplomat whose body is first discovered before a second body of a former Secret Service agent is also discovered, and that agent had been hired to work as her bodyguard. The diplomat's name is Caroline Walters, and it's eventually discovered that Caroline was being blackmailed by way of a DVD that contained pictures of her hooking up with a woman named Laura Green. Pedro Pascal's character's name in this episode is Kevin Green, so I'm just going to assume or guess that he was Laura's husband, although I'm not entirely sure because after skimming a few websites, Kevin is not really mentioned in the various plot summaries of the episode that I could find, and as we've already established, this episode has been removed from more or less every major platform and means of distribution that you could think of. Now, Caroline's bodyguard was hired to protect her by a man named Jack Taylor, who works as a high-profile security consultant, and Jack is eventually revealed to be the killer. His motivation, that is also revealed, is that he was expecting to win a big security job for the Rio Olympics, but he needed to do the blackmail scheme to ensure that Caroline would vote for the Olympics to happen in Rio. At this point, it had not been fully decided or voted upon, or however these things get determined, that Rio would in fact be the host city of this particular Olympics, although they were in the running alongside a few other cities located in other countries. Now, because I have not watched this episode myself, I can't really editorialize about the specific nuances of why this sparked as much negative backlash as it did. I don't know if the killer, Jack Taylor, was even supposed to be Brazilian. But maybe Brazilians, particularly the higher profile ones, simply didn't want anything untoward even remotely associated with a potential Olympics happening in Rio. Now, for the sake of full disclosure, I will briefly mention that I myself am not really a fan of the Olympics, but that has nothing to do with whichever country is hosting it. If you watched one of my older video essays about Blasian solidarity and entertainment media, I talked a bit in that video about how historians have drawn a direct line from the ripple effects of the LA Olympics in 1984 all the way to Rodney King's murder and shortly thereafter the LA riots. And in general, I don't like how the Olympics as an institution leads to things like increased policing, displacing of local residents, be they housed or unhoused, and other issues, the exact details of which can vary from one host country to another, but I will direct you to the website noolympicsla.com, which has outlined some of that information in greater detail. But back to this now infamous Law & Order episode. It originally aired in June 2009, but it didn't air in Brazil until September of that same year. It didn't take long for there to be an uproar in Brazil, although whenever I read that type of description, uproar, it was difficult for me to gauge how much of that was coming from everyday Brazilian civilians just going about living their lives. The various things that would get published would cite upset coming from Brazilian politicians, as well as the committee that was specifically doing the work to push for this bid for Brazil to host the Olympics. In a statement, CO Rio said it expressed repudiation for the irresponsible and frivolous use of the image of the Brazilian bid, which is currently in the middle of a campaign to host the Games. According to the statement, CO Rio bases its actions in this dispute on ethics, seriousness, and total respect for its competitors. Mayor Eduardo Paes also disapproved of the approach adopted by the series. It is disrespectful even to the members of the IOC. The committee's work is absolutely transparent regarding the election. I imagine it could even hinder the American candidacy by insinuating that there could be corruption in the electoral process. It is ridiculous and pathetic, and it will even help strengthen our candidacy. I would be very interested to hear from actual Brazilian people in Brazil about whether or not they have any firsthand memory of this when it happened, if they saw the episode, and if they found anything within that episode that they considered to be a negative comment on Brazil as a potential host. But either way, it's undeniably funny that Brazilian backlash was enough to make a mega corporation more or less erase an episode from their giant propaganda franchise. On the Law & Order fandom wiki, it states, "This episode is not included on the season 8 DVD set, with NBC stating the reason as content reasons. It is also unavailable on legal streaming services like Peacock or 7+, is not rerun in syndication in any country, and is unable to be purchased on iTunes. As a result, it is the hardest episode in the franchise to view legally, and is also considered to be the only banned episode in the franchise." So what exactly is the takeaway here, besides the obvious, well-established joke on social media about how it's a very bad idea to upset Brazilians? I think this situation is yet another reminder of how viewers have a lot more power over what sort of entertainment and art is successful than maybe they themselves realize. Withholding our views, financial support, or promotion is a useful strategy if you don't want to support art that demeans people by way of things like negative stereotypes.
I'm glad we're not watching a cop show. Gotta stop mythologizing the police, for Christ's sake, come on.
Negative publicity can raise awareness, but it can also potentially have the opposite effect where it's ultimately still publicity and makes people curious about the bad thing and then they go and watch it. I saw that happening a lot during this most recent award show season where negative publicity was making a lot of people go and watch a movie that had repeatedly been explained in detail as being racist towards the entirety of Latin America. People here on YouTube wanted to go and watch it so that they could make their videos about that to hop on the trending topic of the moment, instead of maybe using that time to uplift art that was more meaningful, maybe art that was a more insightful look into Latin America specifically, or art that was speaking to a number of other meaningful experiences or issues. Now, I'm not about to claim that you should never talk about art or broader entertainment that is more silly, frivolous, or lighthearted, but I think looking back at this unofficial banning of a propaganda episode made me feel even more secure about many of the changes I've made to my own viewing habits and the things that I have no interest in financially supporting at the cinema or even platforming here on YouTube by way of a review. And that's why I'm so glad that there is really cool art being released by interesting artists and storytellers. And there's also already over a century of compelling art that's been released since the inception of cinema itself. Do you know what I recently watched for the first time? The Wind That Shakes the Barley. That is a 5-star masterpiece. Freaky tales, loads of fun, anti-fascist, a creative mishmash of genres. Mickey 17, which was anti-capitalist, as to be expected from Bong Joon-ho, but also very anti-colonial. And if nothing else, I hope that anyone that looks into this case study of the banned Brazilian Olympics episode of Propaganda Slop will at least learn that you don't actually need to be careless to such an extent that you incur the wrath of an entire country. This is not the only time something kind of like this has happened either. Didn't Adam Levine say something rude one time about Chile and now the entire country hates him? That is wild to me. But not as wild as the fact that Claire Danes is banned from the Philippines because she said some heinously racist stuff about them in the 1990s, and then they went, bet. You're banned for life. Why would you ever want to be banned from visiting the Philippines? I mean, I've never been myself, but I would love to visit. I'm sure that I would have loads of fun if I went. And listen, I'm not here to try to twist anyone's arms into doing something they really don't want to do, but I will tell you right now that I don't use Twitter anymore, and I feel significantly better as a result. I'm seeking out the art that I find more interesting or that I'm more curious about. If a movie is very obviously a corporate product devoid of a true point of view from actual artists, I avoid it altogether. Let's go through some of the things I currently have on my Letterboxd watch list, and then we will sign off for today, and we will, after this, get back to our regularly scheduled videos, including reviews of various upcoming films, going through the Bridgerton Season 4 source material, and just having a good time and banter with that, as well as looking through the print source material of some film adaptations that are on the way. I've had a lot of recommendations sent to me from Brazilian viewers, so I will share a few of those first. Marighella, that's probably going to be my next Brazilian review. I don't have a date decided yet of when I will do that, but last time I checked, that film was available on Prime Video, which means that I don't have to go looking very hard to find it. Central Station, I know that particular one is highly requested, but I don't want to rush to just do the most obvious ones. I'm in no hurry. This is a journey through art exploration. It's not a sprint. Vitória, that's a really new Brazilian film starring Fernanda Montenegro, and I don't actually know when it's going to be released internationally, which is when I would presumably be able to watch it. From what viewers have written to me, they're making it sound like the cops aren't going to do this, so let me just do it myself type of movie. So yes, I will watch that. One Man's War stars Anthony Hopkins and Fernanda Torres, which is a film about the US-backed dictatorship in Paraguay. For films coming out this year, of course, I have Avatar 3 because it's my most anticipated film of the year, along with Avatar 4 and 5.
It's my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, me too.
But other 2025 films I have on my Letterboxd watch list include Wake Up Dead Man, which of course it's on there. I have done many videos about Ryan Johnson's Benoit Blanc whodunits, Sinners, which is Ryan Coogler's upcoming vampire film, and The Housemaid, which I already have posted a video about the source material of that. I read the book and there's a video on it. I have gained an increasing amount of interest in Irish art and history, so some art that I have on my watch list is Hunger, about Bobby Sands' 1981 hunger strike, In the Name of the Father, which is about the false imprisonment of Jerry Conlon, and that is starring Daniel Day-Lewis, so of course I expect it to be excellent. In the Name of the Father was also referenced on Derry Girls, so you may have heard the title there. I recently added the limited series Say Nothing, which I found out about when I saw Lola Pettycrew's acceptance speech at the recent Irish Film and Television Awards, and the speech was so tremendous that it made me go, who is this person? I need to know who they are. They are the absolute coolest, and as it turns out, they won their award for Say Nothing, so that's how we got that there. And then finally, a random assortment of other films I've added. I have The Proud Valley, starring Paul Robeson, who was blacklisted because of Hollywood's complicity in McCarthyism, and the movie is about Welsh coal mining communities. I've been wanting to watch Paul Robeson's filmography for a bit, so I added this one because the premise really drew me in. Carmen, because it stars Melissa Barrera, and she is a friend of the channel. She shared my Your Monster review on her Instagram story last year, and I think she's an absolute icon, so I have zero hesitation about supporting her work. The Pentagon Papers, because it's about the late great whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, and this was a film I found out about because Alan Arkin is in it, and I was poking around his film credits when I was working on my review of O Que Hizo Compañero. And next, we also have Salt of the Earth, which is a film I learned about because I was watching a different, older Hollywood film, and I was poking around to explore various bits of film trivia about some of the talent involved, and I found out that one of the smaller actors in the other film I was watching, Will Geer, he was one of many people blacklisted during Hollywood's complicity with McCarthyism, and he ended up working on this film, Salt of the Earth, alongside many of the others who had been blacklisted. Salt of the Earth is apparently about workers at a zinc mine protesting and going on strike, and it has a female protagonist. So I'm intrigued. I'm looking forward to watching all of these films. Even if they don't get their own dedicated reviews on YouTube, I do a video every month on Patreon sharing my thoughts on every first-time watch that I've done the previous month. I rank them, and it's fun for me to do because I don't need to worry about what's algorithmically trendy on Patreon the way that I do on YouTube, where if you do too many videos that no one wants to watch in close succession on YouTube, it unfortunately can prove detrimental to your channel's overall health. I know we've moved very far past the original point of discussion, which was a banned propaganda episode, but I mostly wanted to just share this last bit with any regular viewers of mine who are still watching, or any new Brazilian viewers, so we can all point and laugh, enjoy a bit of harmless schadenfreude at the expense of a corporation, and also check in with people who would like to know a bit more about what I'm watching or planning to watch. And even though we're still fairly early on in the calendar year, I feel much better by making these adjustments to my viewing habits. Oh, and speaking of Brazilians, or Brazilian diaspora, a film I recently saw, Bob Trevino Likes It, starring Barbie Ferreira. That film is very good. Emotional, heartwarming, it deserves all the support, not just because Barbie is of Brazilian descent, but because the film is excellent. And maybe it's not receiving as much publicity on a large scale because it doesn't have a giant PR machine behind it like corporate franchises get, but if you've made it this far in the video, then yes, I would highly recommend that you watch it. Along with Freaky Tales, of course.
There's too many of them.
That's bullshit. We fight.
But for those who live through it,